This is an Institute of Faculty of Actuaries video on the personal and professional development, which is the student's work experience requirements to obtain the associate and fellowship qualification. This webinar is going to contain some of the key important information that students need to know to progress to Associate and Fellow, and for Associate members who wish to progress to the Fellowship qualification. My name is Matt Tennant and I'm the Quality Manager here at the IFOA, and I'm joined by Laura Phillips, who's the Senior Quality Executive. And this webinar we will talk through the personal and professional developments and run through some of the requirements for student membership. So firstly, we'll hand over to Laura, who will discuss what PPD is.
So what is PPD? Personal and professional development is the practical work experience requirement which applies to all IFOA students and associates on the path to become a fellow. It is the key component of the IFOA qualification. PPD is important as it's designed to make the work-related element an integral part of your ongoing learning experience. It brings the requirement into closer alignment with CPD, which should be completed separately and in addition to PPD. There are three elements to completing PPD. These are satisfying a number of core competencies under three key objectives, maintaining a record of formal learning activities, and demonstrating the learning gained from completing these activities. So what do you need to do? Each year you are required to submit PPD. You will have a unique date to submit your records by. This is usually the date you join the IFOA and is known as your annual PPD deadline date. You will need to submit a minimum amount of PPD each year. There is also an annual requirement to record formal learning activities. There are three objectives to be completed. Each objective contains 10 or more different competencies which carry either a 1 or 2 credit weighting. There are also 4 mandatory competencies. These must be completed before you qualify. The three objectives are effective communications, problem solving and decision making, and professionalism. In addition to recording your credits, you will also need to record at least 2 hours of formal learning activities each year. These activities can include attendance at meetings of local actuarial societies, technical and business presentations, company arranged training, and actuarial related seminars.
So alongside your qualifications, you will be required to complete PPD up until the point where you have all your examinations and you are ready to qualify. And there are 2 different requirements for students who joined on or before certain dates. So for those student members who held student membership up until the 1st of January 2019, you have the following requirements to get to Associate and Fellow. So for those student members who wish to get to the Associate level, you are required to complete 12 months of PPD recording, so a full 12 months cycle before you have enough work experience. And within that first 12 months, you are required to complete 10 credits and log 10 credits within your PPD account. For those students who take longer than 12 months to qualify, so every single year that you maintain your student membership, regardless of what qualification, either associate or fellow, you are required to complete a number of PPD credits per year. So you will need to do 3 credits and 2 formal learning hours each year that you're a student member with us. To become a fellow, you need to have 36 months of work experience. So that's 3 passings of your PPD deadline in order for you to have enough experience logged to become a fellow. You need to have 20 credits logged in your account, and each year that you're a student member with us, again, you need to have 2 hours of formal learning activity and 3 credits per year. This is different to previous work experience requirements for students completing work-based skills or Form A and Form B. As within PPD, similar to CPD, you have to meet a number of annual requirements each year that you're a student member with us. So for those who joined after the 1st of January this year, there is a different set of requirements for these students. The Primarily, the change is that all student members who join the IFOA after the 1st of January 2019 must obtain the associate qualification before you transfer to fellow. So to obtain the associate qualification for these joiners who joined after the 1st of January 2019, you need to have obtained 24 months of work experience recorded within your PPD account. You will need to have 15 credits as a minimum before you can consider going for the associate. And again, for each year that you're a student member with the IFOA, you need to have 3 credits logged per year and then 2 formal learning hours per year logged additionally. So once student members have obtained their associate qualification, they have to have an additional 12 months, so 36 months total, to obtain the fellow qualification. So a total of 36 months, or the minimum of additional 12 months once you become the associate. The total to get to fellow is 20 credits. So once you have obtained your 15 credits as associate, you need to have your additional 12 months experience and then an additional 5 credits, and again logging 3 credits and 2 formal learning per year that you maintain your student member. For student members who obtain associate and then do not want to progress to the fellowship qualification, you are able to contact the IFOA and opt out of PPD indefinitely. And what this means is for those who wish to settle with the associate status, you do not need to keep recording your PPD if your associate is your destination qualification of choice. However, for those who remain as associate and then opt out of PPD, those years that you have opted out of PPD will not count towards your qualification to fellow should you wish to pick up your examinations and progress. So if you obtain your associate qualification and opt out of PPD for a period of 3 years and then decide that you wish to continue with your examinations, those 3 years will not count towards your fellowship qualification and you would have to log some additional time again. So please do bear that in mind for individuals who wish to stick at associate. So in terms of the transitional arrangements, over the next couple of years, the IFOA is phasing out its work experience requirements on the previous regimes that PPD is now replacing. For student members who joined prior to July 2004, if you had joined the Institute of Actuaries before the 1st of July 2004, you were required to complete Form A or Form B. And for those members who joined the Faculty of Actuaries had no work experience requirements at all. For student members who joined between July 2004 and September 2017, you were required to complete the work-based skills regime. New student members of the IFOA who joined after September 2017 were required to do PPD, and then from September 2018, all student members from the old regimes of work-based skills, Form A or Form B, or no work experience requirement, had to complete PPD. So this personal and professional development now replaces all previous work experience requirements, and for those student members who had started on Form A or Form B or work-based skill now needs to complete personal and professional development, and in the next couple of years this will be phased out. So for those student members who were on work-based skills, this table illustrates the balance of what you need to have recorded during the transitional period in order to qualify. On this chart it shows what it is to become a fellow. So for those student members of the IFOA who wish to obtain their fellowship qualification by the end of 2019, you still have the requirement of 36 months of work experience to obtain. You need to have a minimum number of months split between PPD and the previous work experience work-based skills. So we would expect to see a minimum of 12 months recorded on the personal and professional development regime and a minimum of 24 months covered under work-based skills. Within those figures, there can be a little bit of balance. So, for example, if you had 10 months of PPD and you had 26 months of work-based skills, as long as the total still equals 36 months, there is some flexibility for that. So it is not a completely rigid regime. With all of these things, there is balance between it. So if you have more work PPD recorded, so say you have 18 months of of personal and professional development, and you had 16 months of work-based skills, that would be fine, because it's still totaling the same amount. As long as it equals 36 months of experience, then that would be more than acceptable. So by the end of 2020, then we would expect students to have a higher amount of PPD. So we would expect to see up to 24 months of experience logged on PPD and 12 months of work-based skills. For students who started recording their PPD early, they may already have the 36 months covered in 2020 on personal and professional development. That is fine. The majority of students will only have up to 24 months on PPD, and they'll have to tail the end of it with 12 months of work-based skills. But again, as long as you have that 36 months of experience covered over both regimes, that will be fine. Towards the end of 2020, we would expect all student members of the IFOA who are looking to qualify as fellows to have the 36 months of work experience covered under PPD, and 0 work experience will be covered under work-based skills. And as we move into the start of January 2022 onwards, no student members will have any work experience on the prior regimes, and everybody will be on PPD. So just to summarise then, as long as you have the 36 months of experience balanced between PPD and work-based skills over the next 2 years, that will be fine. This table is purely for guidance, but as time progresses towards the end of 2021, we would expect to see more students completing it on personal and professional development and less covered by work-based skills. So for those student members who are on the previous regime of Form A, Form B, the transitional principles apply similar to you. That going into 2020, we would expect to see up to 2 years of work experience recorded on the personal and professional development regime, and up to 12 months covered by Form A or Form B. As we move into 2021 and onwards, we would expect to see your full 36 months recorded on the personal and professional development scheme, and no experience recorded on Form A or Form B. So again, as long as you have the 36 months experience balanced between your previous requirements of Form A and Form B, and then moving on to personal and professional development, as long as it totals 36 months, you are fine. And as we move towards 2020, 2021, we would expect to see more of that recorded on personal and professional development and less recorded on the prior regime. So I'm going to hand over to Laura then to talk about how does the IFOA monitor your PPD requirements.
Yeah, so first of all, students will receive automatic reminders in the run-up to their annual deadline date. These are sent at 60 days, 30 days and 7 days before your deadline to remind you that you have not submitted the minimum amount of PPD for that year. If you have met your minimum requirements, you will not receive these reminders, as you have met your yearly requirement and your next year will start on your deadline date. For non-compliance, if you do not record the minimum amount of PPD by your deadline, you may lose this year of work experience and be subject to further compliance measures. Recurring non-compliance may result in being suspended from exams or mean that you're unable to renew your student membership. It's vital that you contact the IFOA if you are unable to meet your annual requirements for whatever reason. To ensure the standard and accuracy of student records, the IFOA will conduct regular audits of PPD that have been submitted. You'll be eligible to be selected for an audit at any point during this journey and may be subject to multiple reviews during this time. You should try and keep all evidence of how you met your competencies until you've been confirmed as a fellow or associate. You should also keep the details of your supervisor so they may be contacted to verify your submissions. This is particularly important if you move employer. There may be reasons why you cannot complete your annual PPD requirements, such as being on parental leave, having a career break, or being in full-time education. You should contact the IFOA as soon as possible to discuss this, as we may be able to log an exemption in your account, so you do not need to meet your requirement for that year. So your PPD records. You're required to record a minimum amount of PPD credits and formal learning hours whilst you're a student member of the IFOA, or if you're an associate studying for fellowship. The minimum amount per year is 3 credits and 2 formal learning hours. Each PPD record requires the following: an activity description, a learning outcome, an activity date, and confirmation the submission has been discussed with your supervisor. These should all be completed in the year that you're logging them, as you cannot retrospectively record PPD. The learning outcome, or activity description, I'll start with. The activity description should be a concise overview of the activity you're referencing. You should avoid jargon and abbreviations, and it should be able to be understood by someone who is not familiar with your work. There is a limit of 250 characters for the activity description, so please make sure this is concise and does not go over the character limit. An example of what may be accepted is given here. So as you can see in this example, it gives a brief outline of the activity and describes what you have completed. The learning outcome is where we will expect to see the main body of the submission. It should be a descriptive and self-reflective piece of writing describing what learning or development you took from the activity and how you will use this in the future. This reflection is an important business skill which you need to develop throughout your professional career. This is where PPD is different to work-based skills, as in work-based skills you were required to give an example of what you had shown the skill in the workplace. The PPD learning outcome should be how and what you've learnt from this activity, and you should be able to demonstrate this from your professional career. There is a limit of 1,024 characters for the learning outcome, so please be mindful of this when you're completing. As you can see in this example, the learning outcome is descriptive. It discusses what you did, what you learnt, and what you might do next time as feedback.
It's important to note that the learning outcome has got to contain a reflective element, and that is the most important thing when you're completing the learning outcome of PPD. So some things to think about might be what went well on the activity, what didn't go well, what would you improve on for next time. As a result of doing that activity, did you learn anything? What was discovered that was new? What was different? Did you take any peer review from that activity? Did you get any feedback from your boss, from your employer, from your line manager, from your peers? And what, as a result of that activity, had you concluded? So as Laura mentioned, it's a fundamentally different way of submitting work experience when you're doing compared to work-based skills of Form A and Form B, but this should align much closer to when you start completing your CPD as a qualified member. So in terms of the different areas then, as Laura mentioned, there are a series of different categories within PPD: effective communication, problem solving and decision making, and professionalism. So students have a catalogue of different competencies that they can pick and choose from when they are recording their CPD requirements, and we're going to talk through each of these different categories and the different competencies. So the first category is effective communication, and as you can see on this table, here are all the different competencies that are available for students when you come to select your work experience. And there's different ways that you can do this. One is you can have a look at these different competencies, discuss it with your supervisor or line manager, or see whether or not any of these things listed, have you done them within the last 12 months. And if you have, and you think that something that you have done aligns to one of these things, then you'd be able to submit that as a PPD record. Your other option is to have a look through these 3 different categories, and you may think, well, actually, I haven't had a chance to do anything like this. I need to go and make sure within my development plan or my objectives in the next 12 months that I have a chance to prepare a communication plan or contribute to an actuarial report for regulator or present the actuarial works for a non-actuarial audience. So like I said, there's 2 ways of doing it. One is to say, well, actually, I have done something in the last 12 months that I think links to these competencies, or make sure that you plan within your objectives and your work streams that you do activities that links to one of these particular competencies. So effective communication is the first category that students can pick from. And as you can see in the left-hand column here, all the different competencies that you can select. They've been designed so that any student, depending on where they are in the actuarial journey, should be able to complete them. So even if you're a first-year student who's joined a internship scheme or a graduate joiners program, there are competencies that you should be able to do. And for those student members who are close to qualifying or have done a number of years of actuarial experience, again, there should be enough experience here for you to be able to submit records. If you see down the middle column, some of the credits are weighted at 2 credits and some of the credits are weighted at 1. The right-hand column is where it is a mandatory competency or not. So within each of these 3 categories, there are mandatory competencies that you need to submit before you come to qualify. They don't have to be done every year, but you do need to make sure they're submitted before you qualify. So within effective communication, there is 1 mandatory competency: present the results of actuarial work to an informed but non-technical audience. For those student members who may have been a student with us for a number of years, competency 1.1 is actually taken previously from the CA3 exam, where the presentation element is no longer part of the CP3 exam, it is now part of your work experience requirement. So again, slight change there. So the effective communication is the test of your communication skills, both oral, written, your ability to do presentations, your ability to write communication documents and contribute towards externally facing documents as well. So quite a range here of competencies that test your communication skills, as that is one of the core fundamental skills that we expect actuaries to be able to demonstrate. So an example of 1.1, present the results of actuarial work to an informed but non-technical audience. So here are some of the examples of things that you could do as part of this activity. Within one of our mini guides that you can find on our website, we give examples in all of the competencies about things that you can log. These are just examples, but again, it's a useful steer for students who might want to consider what they want to submit. So 1.1 is a mandatory competency. It has to be done before qualification, and it is worth 2 credits when you log that competency. So problem solving and decision making is the second category area. Here is the more technical competencies that we expect students to be able to demonstrate their technical abilities as qualifying actuaries. So here you have some competencies around analysing and validating data sets, distinguishing between material and immaterial factors within a model, but it's also about your decision-making process as well. So things like evaluate the success of a project and understand the reason, demonstrate the use of the ability to use teamwork and time management for better outcomes. So it's technical, but it's also about your problem solving and your decision-making. The one mandatory competency within problem solving is analyse and prioritise stakeholder needs when designing solutions. Here is an example of 2.4, analyse and validate the results in a model, and here are some of the types of activities that you could submit if you're choosing to do 2.4. It's worth 2 credits and it is not a mandatory area. The last area to talk about is professionalism. And professionalism is a very important area for actuaries, and this is why there are 2 mandatory competencies within this area. Demonstrate an understanding of the role of professional and ethical standards in an actuary's work, and demonstrate an understanding of the role of peer review in an actuary's work. So these two competencies have to be completed before you come to qualify. The professionalism area is about your own professionalism development as a qualifying actuary. And again, some of the competencies here, you might want to talk about ethical considerations that you've had to face within a workplace, your understanding of professionalism framework, your understanding of the role of a professional body, about the role of professionalism within the public interest, how important confidentiality is, but also from your own professional development. So things like manage your own personal development plan, and how you would justify your opinion in the face of questioning. So again, a lot more inward reflection within this particular category. So those are the three categories that you need to run through. We ask within PPD that you submit a healthy range across all of these three different categories. The mandatory competencies must be completed before qualifying, but there isn't a minimum amount within those categories that you have to show, because we recognise that actuaries work within lots of different workplaces. But we would ask that students think about submitting a range of competencies to show that you have good ability within each of those three areas.
It's also worth mentioning that these competencies can be completed if you're not working in a strictly actuarial role. They have been designed to be adapted to other non-traditional areas of work, so don't feel that you're not able to complete them, especially the ones that say actuaries work or in an actuary's obligations, etc. They should be able to be flexible and adapted to whatever profession you are working in. But if you do need any advice on whether you can complete them or how you should complete them, you are able to contact us.
Super, thanks Laura. So, as we mentioned, the mandatory competencies are these areas. They must be completed before you come to submit, and they do not need to be completed each year which you're a student member, but they must be done by the time you come to qualify. Okay, so we're now going to do a demonstration of what the PPD account looks like and what it is to actually submit a PPD record. So within your PPD account, and you can find this on the IFOA's website, so under your My Account section you will find your PPD account, and once you have selected the PPD icon, you will land within this particular account area, and there's a few important things to note. So this is a test account. This isn't a real student's account. When you land on this PPD area, here are some things that are important. So as Laura mentioned earlier on in the webinar, your PPD deadline is unique to you as a student member, and it will always be set to the joining date of when you join the IFOA. So if you joined the IFOA on the 14th of August, your deadline will always start, or your PPD year, will start on the 14th of August, and it will run to midnight the night before the following year. So it will always work on that particular cycle. So when you land on this account, it will show you the PPD records that you have submitted within your current PPD year. A lot of students will contact the IFOA because they log into their account and they suddenly see their PPD for the previous year has gone. It hasn't gone, it will only show you records in the current year. So there's a tab here called Filter PPD Records by Date. So if you wanted to see your PPD records over 3 years, you amend the date parameters and that should show you all of your PPD records within that period. See Detailed Report is a very useful tab where it will pull all of your PPD records that you have submitted into a one big document that you may want to screenshot or print or take to your supervisor to discuss. So I will take you through what submitting a PPD record looks like. So by clicking the Add PPD Record, it will take you to this particular tab. You can then choose one of the 3 categories or formal learning activities. So if we select professionalism, it will then drop down the list of all the different competencies that we discussed in that prior slide. So if we select demonstrate the understanding of the role of professional body, this will then show you that it's worth 1 PPD credit. So within activity description, here is where you need to record the short description of what activity that you have watched. You're capped at 250 characters, so again, as Laura said, please do be precise. So within the activity description, you can copy and paste from a Word document into this, and here is when you would write your activity description overview. There is a date box here, and these dates is the date where you did that particular activity. If your activity was over a particular period, you do need to select one date, that's the way in which our system works. So if this were a real activity, we would put, for example, the 2nd of December. You can only record PPD activity from your last deadline to your current date. You can't record any activity in the future, so it has to be past. And the learning outcome is where you need to, as Laura mentioned earlier, publish the body of your text. You have 1,024 characters, and here is where you would detail your learning outcome. There's a final box here which is about being discussed with supervisor. It is important that you discuss all of your PPD submissions with your supervisor or line manager. It's also important to note that your supervisor or line manager for your PPD submissions does not have to be a qualified actuary. So when you come to qualify and complete your sign-off documentation at the end of the process, that does need to be a qualified actuary, but for the individual PPD records, it does not need to be. So when you click Add, that will then load your PPD record into your account, and you should have a confirmation up here that says your PPD record has been added. You can add more records, but we'll quickly go back to the home page where we can see under professionalism, you can see there that has then logged the submission within the account. Right at the very bottom of the page, you can see here that this is the total number of credits that you have logged this year. So if this student were a real student, they will have logged 5 credits and no formal learning activity. Formal learning activity is logged in the same way, and the records look exactly the same. The last tab to make you aware of is the Edit PPD Records. So once you've submitted a PPD record, you can amend it, but you can only amend records within your current PPD year. So once that deadline passes your year, you won't be able to edit or amend any records from your previous year. This is probably the most important thing to look at when you log in your PPD account, is to be aware of your joining date and your current PPD period. Each student member will have a unique deadline, so your colleagues and your fellow other actuarial students who you may work with, they may have different PPD deadlines depending on when they joined the IFOA.
So we hope you found that useful. For more information, please visit our website. The PPD pages have recently been updated, so contain a lot more newer and more up-to-date information. But if you do have any questions, you're able to contact our Education Services team, and they'll be able to help you further, particularly if you're concerned or confused about your own personal requirements. But please also give us any feedback as well that you think might be relevant to add on to the pages, or any further questions that you may have.
Super. Well, again, I hope you found that useful, and please do get in contact if you have any queries. Thank you.
Thank you.